Hey, I'm Mark Wahlberg, and this is Ascension Presents.
Okay, so this is relatively dark. I don't know if this is, I need to adjust this or not, but here's where we're at. Okay, here we go. We're gonna do something a little bit different, differently. Today, not only is it Wednesday of Holy Week when this video is released, it is also the same day that a new movie called Father Stu is being released in theaters, starring Mark Wahlberg and Mel Gibson. I did an interview with him, so in the midst of this Ascension Presents video, there's a little interview. I got to sit down and talk with Mark Wahlberg. It's the story of a real life story of a priest from Montana. His name was Stu, Father Stu. The beginning of his story is not like the end of the story. A couple of things. One, the movie Father Stu is rated R. It's rated R for a real reason, because of the anger and because of the language. Full disclosure, there are F-bombs in almost every scene. I'm not gonna say every scene, but here's the story, the context of the story, as Mark Wahlberg is gonna explain, is this man Stu, when he was growing up, at one point, I think when he was 6 years old, his older brother had inexplicably died in his sleep. And what they did was they took this family that was already kind of indifferent to God and put them in this path of hatred towards God. Like, they just absolutely violently hated even the idea, the concept that there could be a God who allowed his brother and his mom and dad's son to die. There's a lot of anger, a lot of brokenness, and it's not the kind of brokenness that is easily resolved. It is a kind of brokenness that is only resolved by grace. And it's just pretty remarkable. So here is the interview, for lack of a better word, with Mark Wahlberg, and a conversation I just got to have with him. So I hope you enjoy it. It's a few minutes long, and I'm going to say something at the end of this interview. Mark, thank you for taking this time. I know that you have had a really, I can't imagine how exhausted you must be with this whole talking to people, answering the same old questions, but I was able to see Father Stu, loved it, and the first thing one of the things that was so powerful was the relationship between Stu and his dad. And I don't know, I just wanted to ask you if there was any part in that was clearly you and Mel Gibson had a incredible bond, but I would say, like, the bond was, broken, it was wounded, but it was strong. I don't know if you had anything you could just tell me about that.
Yeah, well, one of the things that really drew me to Bill's and Stu's story was the fact that obviously, they had lost a younger child early on, and they didn't really have the skills to cope with that kind of loss. As we know, parents aren't supposed to bury their children, and so Stu was kind of basically left to his own devices, and it wasn't until later on where he was diagnosed with an incurable disease that his father was able to come back and really redeem himself and take care of him in the way that he didn't get to when Stu was young. I mean, he bathed him, he clothed him, he fed him, he did all of those things. He had gotten sober, he'd gotten baptized. I mean, Stu really worked his magic on his mom and his dad.
Yeah, it was the conversations, if you want to call them conversations, between Stu and his dad, Stu and Bill, were really raw. And that was one of the pieces of this movie, that when it comes to faith, it's not a kid's movie, right? It's not a Hallmark Christian movie at all.
No, it is a very real, raw movie about tough grace and tough mercy. And I think it couldn't be more necessary than right now, because we've all been going through things that we never imagined we'd face in our lifetime, which is why we're getting the reaction to the film that we've gotten. Everybody relates and identifies with it on a very personal level. And the response has just been remarkable. And it's also encouraging people. They leave the theater feeling very optimistic, hopefully a renewed faith and hope, and also a reminder to see the good in people and that people aren't beyond redemption. And everybody's challenged by Stu to just find their role in God's big picture and do a little bit more and be a little bit better.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I just, that unconditional love, you say tough grace and tough mercy, is so real, because one of the things I've found is, I did this thing last year where I read the Bible in a year, like a podcast every day kind of a thing. And a bunch of
people, I heard about it.
Yeah, it was a great grace. But one of the things that people told me was that they didn't realize how broken the story is. Like, they thought, oh, the Bible, the Bible's, it's kids' stories. And then realizing it as they're being read to.
Not little fairy tales. Lots of
not at all. And so Stu's life is marked with, it's a real person, right? So I even like I like the moment where Stu's sitting on the bench with Carmen. They're having the
Yeah,
conversation.
I mean, he's still a guy. He still thinks she's the most beautiful woman that he'd ever met or encountered in his life, and she's the reason that he is and now dedicated to Christ. I mean, she was the introduction to Jesus, right? And also with his visit for Mary, through Mary to Jesus. But we wanted to make something that was real and that people could relate to, and that's why Stu touched so many people, because people knew he was credible. All of his real life experience was now being applied to doing his good work, and they knew that he had been through all the stuff that he was basically counseling them on. And who better than somebody with real life experience to kind of help you get through these difficult struggles, and to see how Stu dealt with adversity. And if we're all lucky enough to get old, we're going to be faced with these things. We've all dealt with loss, especially now during COVID, in ways that we didn't think we would.
Yeah, and you mentioning that he was so real. There was the kind of the contrast seminarian with him, the guy who at the end, there's I don't want to spoil anything, but this revelation of, again, more father stuff, where it comes to, Stu being willing to kind of in some ways fight against his father, and this other seminarian being unwilling to do this. Was that
and then Stu having it out by God and refusing.
Yes.
It's remarkable. And I remember the Archbishop Thomas, when he saw the film, he was really appreciative that was there as well.
Yeah.
And seeing how difficult it is for lots of people,
And it just seemed like every time Stu was broken, as you keep saying in the movie, it kept bringing him closer to Christ. What was it in? I mean, that's the gospel in so many ways. That's the mystery of redemptive suffering in so many ways.
That's going to start a bit of a movement, I think, because people are they're going through it. And if they find comfort in that, wow, that's a very powerful thing, to be able to embrace it in the way that he did. I mean, he handled it obviously with dignity.
Well, it seems like the most essential thing there is trust. Like, I mean, that's why I keep going back to that. I started out with talking about noticing the father relationship between Stu and Bill, and even this other priest or other seminarian and his father, and here's God the Father, where it's in the midst of suffering. How do I still trust God? Like, because it's tough, but it's, as you said, tough grace. I just want to let you know that I am praying for you, praying for your family. And thank you so much for doing this work. And also, thank you so much for taking this time with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Father. I really appreciate it. God bless you.
You bet. You too.
So one of the things that you might have noticed from that interview, I am not good at, if you caught this, that was basically me saying, hey, Mark Wahlberg, here's what I noticed in the movie, right? One of the things that comes back, remember, he said tough mercy and tough grace. Something, if you get the chance to go to this movie, again, it's not for children. Just like the Bible is not for children. The Bible is stories about real life and real brokenness and real pain and real suffering, and how God actually enters into real brokenness and real pain and real suffering in a real way. That it's not easily resolvable. In fact, when Stu comes to know who God is, it doesn't take away all of his problems. In fact, that's when he realizes that he is going to die from this disease. But here's an interesting thing, and this is the thing for all of us, especially here during this Holy Week, is the role of suffering in our lives. As Mark Wahlberg points out, it was in the movie, it was in Father Stu's suffering that he allowed the Lord to get closer and closer and closer to him. Again, this is not a candy sugar-coated version of Christianity. This is the gospel in the most clear way you could possibly really understand the gospel, living, pertaining and impacting our lives right now. Because Jesus, on the cross, he didn't come to take away our suffering. He came to transform our suffering. He didn't come to remove pain and death. He came to redeem pain and death. And this is so important because there is this false version of Christianity out there that says that when you come to know Jesus, he takes away all your crosses. What is the actual vision of Christianity is Jesus says, if you want to be my disciple, you want to follow after me, you want to belong to me, you have to deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow after me. Where does his path lead? It leads all the way to Golgotha. It leads all the way to the crucifixion. It leads all the way to the cross. And then it goes through the cross to a place of resurrection, to a place of true redemption. But again, Jesus didn't come to take away our pain. He came to transform our pain. He didn't come to remove our suffering. He came to redeem our suffering. And this is so important because the critical thing is, I'll talk about this tomorrow night at the Massive Holy Thursday. If you want to kind of join us, please go to your parishes and join in the prayer. but I'll mention this tomorrow night at the Holy Thursday Mass, is the thing that transforms Stu's life, is the thing that transforms every one of our lives. And that is, at the beginning of the movie, here is God, I do not trust you. In fact, I hate you. By the end, Stu got to the point where he knew who God was. No matter what would happen to him, he could say, God, I know who you are, and I trust you. Even though you're not removing my pain, even though you're not taking away my suffering, you have redeemed my pain. You have transformed my suffering. And no matter what happens to me, I know that I can trust you. This is the switch. This is the transformation that God wants in every one of our hearts. Because this is the message of the gospel. Jesus didn't come to take away our crosses. He came to transform our crosses so that our lives don't end in death, but pass through death into new life. And we will always be willing to question God's role, God's action in our lives until we get to that place that Father Stu got to, where we say, okay, God, no matter what happens to me, I am going to trust you. No matter what happens to me, I'm going to let you get close to me in my wounds, in my suffering, in my pain, and literally even in my death. So, do I recommend this movie? I think it was really, really good. Not for children, not for kids, just to let you know that. And not for the faint of heart, just like the gospel is not for the faint of heart. But it is for those who have broken hearts, which is for people like you and for people like me. Anyways, for all those who Ascension Presents, my name is Father Mike. God bless, and happy Holy Week.